Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. The Ghana Statistical Service recently outdoored the data on labor issues in the economy when we talk about unemployment. But are we surprised by this data, looking at the current challenges that the economy is going through, that about 1.76% of the labor force are unemployed? How do we get out of this challenge as a country and the economy? And what about the talk about the economy recovering because of the IMF program, revenue, expenditure, and all these other issues wrapped up on PM Express Business Edition as we talk about the Ghanaian economy and, of course, our unemployment situation in this country. Well, I am again, grateful to have the head of the Econs Department of the University of Ghana, Legon, Professor William Boateng. Prof, appreciate your time.
Thank you.
It's been quite a long time and difficult moving you out of the Legon campus to studio here.
It's been. Of course, we have a lot on our plate. Head of department, you teach, you have to do research and administration. And therefore, sometimes it's very difficult to get out of the office.
How are you doing yourself?
Well, I'm doing very well. Doing very, very well. Sometimes the stress of work, but we are managing.
Interesting. Something a little bit told me, that now Professor William Boateng is a full professor. This is the first time since 1973 having a Ghanaian attaining that feat in the economics department. How are you taking this?
Well, I'm humbled by this, and when it was published, that was on Good Friday, and I went to church, and I was very quiet. I was very quiet because I was just thinking about it, and I feel, well, I don't think it's me, because I look back to the late 70s when we were in primary school, Saito, talking about local authority, primary school, back in the village, and you moved from there, coming to your own secondary school, the same village secondary school, coming to Kumasi High School, and go to the university and be able to get to this point. I think I was very humbled.
And then an encouragement to other persons who are aspiring to get to that position, of course.
I guess so. And for me, I think my people down there, especially my O-level school, Akumadan Secondary School, I should expect them to know that no matter where you are, it's a matter of taking your studies seriously and making sure that you have your focus, and I think you can make it.
But what do you tell those who argue that accounts is quite difficult, and people, your students on campus who always complain that when it comes to Professor Boateng and there's labor issues and economics and econometrics, it is quite difficult for people. A lot of students on campus are complaining.
Well, I tell my students that they should have this principle at the back of their mind. Economics difficult, economics is easy. So I tell them economics is difficult depending on you. Economics easy depending on you.
Not econometrics.
Econometrics is not difficult. if you ask me in undergraduate program, all the courses, the one that I would think to be more difficult would be micro theory, which is economic theory, which I teach in the final year. Yeah. That is a bit more difficult. Econometrics is not that difficult. We just make a lot of noise about it. But it's up to the student to take it seriously. If you come to my office, I can still tell you and give you the notes that I wrote when I was a student in the first year. I still have my FUE notes. I still have my final year notes. I still have my MPhil notes. So that shows that you have to be focused. And sometimes when you are teaching, you just have to refer back to what you were taught and changes that have been made, then you take it up from there.
There's the current happenings in the economy, again, made teaching more interesting, more challenging, or sometimes disproving a lot of theories, which economics is all about.
I think what we are experiencing now, for me, shows that economic theory works. It has worked in some countries. Sometimes we overshadow some of these things with politics. And of course, if you borrow and you don't look at how you are borrowing. And I think sometimes we need to look back. And in my department, we are thinking about coming up with introducing economic history to be able to know where we've come from and how we got here. Many people don't know that this situation that we find ourselves have happened before. If nothing at all, 23 years ago, or let's say 22, when we went to HEPIC, I mean, that was a similar problem. But the difference is that at that time, the debt that we were having were more concessionary kind of debt. I mean, it was the IMF, the World Bank, and bilateral kind of debt. But this time, we have the commercial element to be quite big, and that makes it a bit more serious. And if we had learned our lessons from the HEPIC, I think we could have done better. I mean, you don't need rocket science to know that we cannot borrow short-term and use it, or long-term and use for short-term kind of projects. You cannot borrow on commercial basis and use it for social projects that will not be able to generate enough kind of returns to pay back. You cannot borrow and start project, and when government changes, the new government comes and say, I am not going to continue with that kind of project, and you will still have to pay back. And our system has created what we have. And I can tell you there are many projects that have been there for a long time, and government upon government come and say, well, it wasn't my time that I took it. I mean, a typical example, I'm told, is a project at Konfanoche, which was started by the head of state, former head of state, that is a Champon. It has been there since then, and I'm told, sometimes you cannot even use it. And if you contracted loan to do that kind of project, it has become a white elephant, but you are paying for it. So sometimes we can do auditing and find out the loans that we contract, the kind of thing that we do, are we able to finish? And when we finish, are we able to generate returns to be able to pay back? If we are not able to do that, then we continue to have that kind of problem. Because if we are learning from what happened during our HEPIC period, when we had concessionary loan, that one you may think that is not commercial, so you could afford to do what you are doing. But if you go for commercial loan, and then you don't, the project starts and gets somewhere, and then there's change of government. A new government comes and say, well, it wasn't my project, so I'm not going to continue. But you have to pay.
I'll be coming back to this debt discussion and the IMF program, but I just want to quickly move back to the unemployment situation. Now, my producers will be rolling the numbers on the screens for us. Recent data that was put together by the Ghana Statistical Service, where it talked about the fact that out of a labor force of 12.76 million, employed as 11, and 1.76 are unemployed. And further, it gives further breakdown in 2021, it was 11.6. In 2022, the third quarter, it was 12.76 million. And also a further breakdown of the overall versus youth unemployment. Look at 13.4 overall and 19.7% as well in terms of the numbers here. Let's look at the youth unemployment. You have the youth not in employment, education or training. That is where the seriousness is. 25%. Youth unemployment rate is 19.7% as well. 2 out of every 3 persons are unemployed were females. That's another interesting thing that we have to look at. Transition from informal employment to unemployment is on the average 5 times more than the formal unemployment situation. And there's an issue even about the fact that the people with the required skills to even work with, and those who are for you, were you surprised by this data? Or some would say that looking at the current state of the economy, it was expected.
Well, I'm not surprised. And I think if you follow the statistics, you wouldn't be surprised. He gives figures for 2021 population census, and unemployment rate was 13.4%. And the first quarter of 2022 gave you 13.4%. Second quarter gave you 13.9%. Third quarter gave you 13.7%. So it's not surprising because we haven't changed. I remember we came out of the COVID, and during the COVID, a lot of jobs were lost. And we are recovering quite gradually. And then all of a sudden, we were hit by the economic challenge that we are having now. So I was not surprised that we had the 13.7, 13 point this border. So it's not surprising. When you talk about the absolute figures, 1.7 million, some people think that, well, it's too small. Others, but
in percentage terms, it was scary for me. But when I again looked at the employable numbers, i.e. the absolute numbers or the actual numbers. Or it's like, okay, is that a big deal?
It is. I mean, you're talking about 1.7 million. And I was telling one of your sister stations that take Accra Sports Stadium. And I think I'm told that the capacity is 40,000.
Yeah.
So 40,000 times 20. So Accra Sports Stadium times 20 gives you 1.6 million.
And these are employable skills, or these are persons.
These are people who don't have jobs and they are available for work.
Okay.
So these are the people we are talking about. Those who don't have jobs and they are available for work. And that is a 1.7 million that we are talking about. Of course, when you break it down, we don't want to go into detail, you realize that there are some that were looking for work and there are some that did not look for work. But we put all of them together and give you the 1.7 million. And that also brings me to the question of need. And some people confuse the need and unemployment rate. The need is very important, especially for young people. So the need accounts for the unemployment plus people who are inactive. When I say inactive, these people are inactive outside the school system. So we are talking about young people between 15 and 35. We look at those who are working employed, then those who are in full-time training or schooling. So when we take those people out, some of them will be unemployed, some of them will not be part of the unemployed, but they have to form part of those that we need to look at. For example, employment and work are different. Two different
Help me
things.
out.
Okay. So when you look at the data, and ILO gives us these concepts. So you can have somebody who is working and the output from that work is solely for market, or partly for market, or solely for own use. So if I am in the village and I have my farm, I just go there, get my pepper, my tomatoes, my cassava, everything. I don't send any of them to the market. So that is what I feed on. That kind of thing is work, but it is not employment.
Interesting.
So those people will then be part of the need, as it were. So you have to capture those people and know that these are the people that we also cannot forget about them. So that also brings to the question, what is the value of work? And even this, there are some kind of work that are not considered as employment, something like home care. So an individual is at home. Let's say you have your wife who is just taking care of the children, housewife. You're not paying, but the kind of work the wife is doing is not taken as employment or even work. But if you had employed a domestic helper to come and take over that kind of work, you pay that person, and your wife goes out to work. So it means that there is a value of the work that your wife is doing as housewife. But the statistics will not take that into account because she's housewife, she's not going out there to look for jobs. So policies should not concentrate on those people. Policies should concentrate on those who are jobless, and when there is work available, they will be able to take it up.
If I look at this data, and some will say, what happened? So what do you make of the so-called noise or political statement that we have employed X amount of people, we have provided jobs for X amount of people? Because this number exposes those statements.
So we need to look at the definition of jobs and employment. And I think policymakers should always focus on what Ghana's Healthcare Service produce to be able to come up with policies.
Measure.
If we don't look at our institutions and then depend on the data that they come out with, and then we come up with other kind of data, it becomes very difficult to follow. So for instance, when we say job creation and employment generation, in advanced countries, they are almost the same, or let me say the same. But when you come to our part of the world, you can create job, but you have not employed the person. Let me give you a typical example. So I am a faculty at the University of Ghana. So let's say UNDP wants somebody as a consultant to do some work for 1 month, and I am qualified. So that's consultancy. So I take that kind of job. UNDP has created a job for me, but they haven't employed me.
Wow.
So when you talk about employment, no. But when you talk about job that has been created, yes. So at a point in time, you can create 3, 4 jobs for me a day or even a week for one person. But in advanced countries, the system is such that that kind of opportunity that I have gotten will go to my employers because I'm well paid in the university. So any other activity I undertake outside the university, it should come to the university. I have a very good friend and brother who is at Harvard University. When he comes here, Harvard has to pay for where he will sleep. He has to sleep in a hotel. Even he has his own house. But no, you have to sleep in because you've come on official duty. So they make sure that you are catered for. So every small thing that you do, it should go to the university. But if you have me, and I'm not well paid, I mean, it's very small. So it means that I have to take that kind of opportunity. So that becomes a job, but not employment. However, sometimes when we take some of the data as employment, but we need to look at how we add them. Let me give you an example. So I have been employed in the university in 2017. So when University of Ghana is talking about number of people that were employed in 2017, I will be captured. In 2018, I left the university and took up appointment at, let's say, Electricity Company of Ghana. Electricity Company of Ghana will capture me in 2018 as employed. Then I leave Electricity Company of Ghana, 2019, I go to another public institution to employ. So I have moved, so I'm one person. So when you add 2017, 18, and 19, you've counted me 3 times. And therefore, when you want to talk about employment generation, or if you want to equate it as job creation in terms of numbers, you need to look at the exit, those who are exiting, to be able to get the net. So you are here as business desk. Let's say you have 5 people employed, and then 3 leaves. 3 of them, they leave, so you are left with 2. And then your employers bring 2, so you are 4. And you say, oh, we have created jobs for 2 people. That it cannot be, because 3 people have left, and you've replaced them by 2. So if anything at all, there's what? Negative employment creation.
These are technicalities. So is the politicians right if they say that, well, my duty is to create the job? As to whether these are sustainable jobs or quality jobs, that should be for another debate. And therefore, that person might not be wrong if he says that I have created X amount of job in the economy during this time.
Yes, you've created that amount of job. That is fine. But if you created that amount of job and the persons come, it's not sustainable. It takes just a week for that kind of job. The person will come back to ask for more. And that is why your unemployment rate will continue to rise. Because you've created a job for the person and that job lasted for only 1 month or only a week. So after that, the person joins the unemployed. And that is why tax service data is very interesting. Talk about transition, movement from work to unemployment, from unemployment to inactivity, from this sector to this sector. So it shows you the dynamics and the movement, the flow of people in there. That is what policymakers should take a look at.
Should policymakers move away from just the job creation to sustainable jobs for, the layman's term I'm using here, or quality jobs? That is where we should be looking at.
So policymakers should move away from what they call job creation to employment generation. And that employment generation here, we are talking about employing somebody sustainably, and that kind of employment can last for at least 6 months.
The bankers will always argue and make this argument that when the economy recovers, obviously, interest rates will drop. What about bringing that same argument to employment? Some will say that when the economy recovers, obviously, there will be the quality jobs or there will be the employment. So when the economy is not doing well, should we be arguing about quality jobs or employment creation and all the rest?
Well, when the economy is not doing well, like the situation we find ourselves, the first thing is to ensure macroeconomic stability. And I liken it to a human being who is suffering from high fever. When a person is suffering from high fever, the first thing you do is to tame the person, get the person stable, and then you can apply whatever medicine you want to apply on the person. So if you look at our economy, what we are facing now, we are having problem with macro stability. Inflation is 45%. Exchange rate is not doing quite well. Over the past 3 weeks or so, I think it has been stable within the range of 11 and 12. So that is quite okay. Our debt is somewhere. We are still struggling to get IMF to come on board and so on. So the focus for me, government, should be to look at how we can stabilize the economy. And when we stabilize the economy, that is when growth will follow. And the growth will not just follow, but we need to break down the growth into where the growth is coming from before jobs will follow, or let's say employment will follow.
How can we get it right in terms of that stability, the macro stability as we speak right now? Are we getting it right? Are we touching the right spot that would bring about this macro stability in the shortest possible time?
Well, I think we are trying our best, but we need to do more. If you want somebody to come on board, you yourself have to make sure that you have also cleared your home. You have cleaned up, let me use that word, clean up your home. Everybody has spoken about the fact that if you want us to join the debt exchange, if you want us to pay more, you have to look at the other side, which is expenditure. And it appears to me government is not looking at expenditure side of the equation. And that is where we need to look at. I mean, there are so many.
Where can we, and again, playing the devil's advocate here, the government will argue that a very rigid budget, wage bill and all the rest. Where can government practically cut in these times to bring about that balanced budget, or to send the signals to the citizens that, listen, we are taking those right steps, so bear with us in our efforts to turn around the economy?
If you look at IMF prescriptions all over, and you can start from 1984, when they came in with the World Bank, the first thing is to downsize the public sector, if you remember.
Yeah.
So,
because that's where the problem is coming from.
That is what they said the problem is coming from. So many of the public sector people lost their job. So if you look at it from that perspective, they want you to reduce expenditure, downsize the public sector. Public sector includes the government, the size of the government. And when you see the size of the government, it's not only the number of ministers. Yeah. There are so many other appointees. And remember, and when you take the Presidential Staffers Act, there are so many presidential staffers whose status are equated to ministers. Some are equated to cabinet ministers, some are equated to ministers, non-MP, some are equated to deputy ministers. So if you have 80 ministers and you have 150 presidential staffers, you have to add them because the budget is equal to that. So when we talk about it, we only talk about, ministers. No, but behind that, there are so many appointees that need to be looked at. And that downsizing or rationalization must start from there. Sometimes it also gives some kind of signal to the public that we are also doing something at our backyard. But when you say we should pay more, but then you see that many people, I mean, the one who is asking you to pay more is not also cleaning up his backyard, then it becomes a bit of a challenge.
So the downsizing would help us in the across-board, not just the political appointees. That would bring in some savings. And that could help with the current situation as we speak right now.
Yes, I mean, we talk about the wage bill being high. Can we audit the wage bill to find out that those who are being paid are indeed working?
Prof, this is your area. Why have we struggled so much over the years to get around this wage bill challenge?
Yes, we will continue to do that unless we are able to get our system, the payment system, to be right. I mean, you may get somebody who is in the public sector and taking salaries from 3 different sources. Government wouldn't know. Unless somebody says that, well, this person is here, this person is here, the same person is here. So government is paying one person 3 times. When that happens, government will be bleeding. That one is not the role of government to know that. It is up to the managers of some of these people to be able to know that we are actually paying people what they are due. And that is where the systems must be put in place to ensure that if public sector workers are being paid, it means they are working to be paid. So there should be the need to clean up all these. The leakages must be cleaned. While we are telling government to also do its part, we also have to do our part and ensure that we are paid based on what we do.
But we're supposed to take that very critical step, because some are saying that we know where the problem is coming from, be it government. We know, we've cried loud about this wage bill challenge. We know where the problem is coming from.
I think government is doing a bit well, but they need to speed up. I will give you an example. If you take the statistic that Government Statistical Service brought up, if you take the raw data that they have, every individual has an ID. So you have about, let's say, the sample size of 70,000. And each individual in that 70,000 has a unique ID. So if you want to merge, you will be able to merge from whichever section that we have. That is why the Ghana card is so important. So the Ghana card is the key to whatever we can do. So Ghana card should be used to ensure that if I am being paid in the university, my Ghana card is there. If you are being paid here, your Ghana card is there. So if you find me being paid in the university and find me being paid at Jubilee House, and it is the system can be synchronized, you will know that no, this person has been paid here, cannot be paid there. You know, the government has a system where if I go on sabbatical from the University of Ghana and go to Cape Coast to work, I cannot take 2 salaries.
Okay.
You know that. So government has all these systems there. It is up to the technical people to use the Ghana card to ensure that everybody has one particular ID. And therefore, you cannot go here and take and go this place to take.
Prof, we'll be coming back. We're looking at talks about recovery, the IMF program, whether it can really do the trick for us. Still a bit about the expenditure cuts. Are we seeing government taking those critical steps to try and turn things around? Revenue, and also what we are picking up in terms of inflation, are we turning things around? This is PM Express Business Research to look at Ghana's economy and the employment situation. We'll take a short break and we will be right back. Welcome to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about the economy and Ghana's unemployment situation. How can we get around this challenge? Professor William Boateng is the head of the Econs Department at the University of Ghana, Lagos. We are talking about the economy, economics, statistics, IMF program, and revenue. All these issues wrapped up on PM Express Business Edition. Let's talk about the IMF program. Let's talk about we making progress and all the rest. For you, do you think that this is the tick that can turn around or aid in the recovery of the economy, or basically it's just about stability?
Well, where we are, I think the only thing for me that can help us move out of the doldrum is to get the IMF come on board. Because, I mean, in terms of foreign exchange from Eurobond, it's shut. So where do we go? So the IMF have to come in. I'm sure when they come in, there are so many things that they will not allow us to do. Of course, there are some of the conditionality that, I mean, it will hurt us. I mean, in terms of
labor,
employment. I mean, that one is there. I mean, rationalization, or they will not allow new employment unless somebody is retiring or somebody exits.
And that is not good for the academia.
Well, that is true. I mean, as head of department, I expect that we can get more. But I think that all of us have to tighten our belt. Because if the whole economy collapses, there's not going to be any economy for us to work for. Therefore, if we all have to tighten our belt. So, for instance, if you eat 3 times a day, and then because of the condition you have at home, you are supposed to eat 1.5 times a day, so that after a year, you will come back to it.
But some will say the government should take a lead in that area.
Of course.
Government cannot appear to be not taking the lead.
Exactly.
By telling the citizens to tighten their belt.
Yes, that is why government should also tighten their belt. I mean, I expect that there are some projects that government may have to take a second look at.
Like?
And I guess Agenda 111 is something that government should take a second look at. Because, I mean, we want to have 111 hospital projects.
In these times.
So somebody will ask, so from 1957 up to now, how many hospital projects have we been able to construct? Say that within a period of 3 or 2 years, we need to get 111. If everything is good, the economy is sound, the revenue coming, we don't have these pressures, that is fine. But where we find ourselves, I think we need to prioritize the projects so that we'll be able to get out of this.
Some would want to link this resistance to expenditure rationalization to elections. And some would also want to say that we've always lost it during the election year. Now there's an IMF program. How are all these things going to play out in trying to rationalize expenditure and the IMF program and do an election year when we always lose it? And I mean, you have the data.
George, you can't eat your cake and have it. You cannot eat your cake and have it. I think that is what all of us have to understand. And I don't think the IMF will come in. IMF will get all these creditors to not to forgive us our sins or debts, but to be able to hold on to some of the things that we are some of the payments that we are supposed to make, only for us to overbloat our expenditure. I think it will not be fair. I think we need to look at the economy first before we look at the election. I am not a political scientist, but I know that if
your economy,
if your message is good, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to give somebody money before they do it. And now even electorates are becoming wiser. And if they see that, well, we've been here for 4 years, you never constructed this road, and now that there's going to be election, you are going to construct it, they may even vote against you.
Some have always argued that the biggest vote for you is about when you stabilize the economy and I can afford 3 square mil a day, the city is stable, inflation is down. Obviously, people would give you thumbs up, stay there and stabilize the situation.
That is why I said the first order condition is to get the economy work again. And if the economy works again, people will know that, well, I don't have my road fixed, but at least I can eat and eat well. I mean, my lights are on every day. Some of the basic things that I expect to have, I have it. And therefore, the roads and other things will come later on.
I was asking about the IMF program and the expectation whether it will bring about the start. Some people have said that we should measure our expectation on this fund program. I mean, you being an economist, you might hold a different view that it will bring about that stability, that recovery, or what?
So normally there's this saying that if you want to know what will happen in the future, look at what has happened in the past. So not to take you so far, I mean, we were down the recession in the early 1980s. So we had the IMF program. So let's say the Bretton Woods institution came in, that's the economic recovery program and the structural adjustment. It has its own negative effects. There's no doubt about that. But at least we're able to recover. And since 1984, we had never recorded any negative growth as a country. So when IMF comes in, it gives some kind of confidence to external creditors. It gives confidence to almost everybody. They become police on how we do things. And that will also make policymakers and government conform, not minimize the excesses in terms of something that will bring the economy to its knees. So for the IMF coming in, I think it will give us the stability that we want, but it will not be something that will solve the problem within 1 month or 2 months. No, we should look at something within a year or two.
Government says they are looking at somewhere end of May, all other things being equal. I mean, you being in this space, doing the extrapolations and based on what you're picking up, you think that we'll get this program in the second quarter?
Well, I think Ghana has the goodwill when you talk to people. I mean, even some of us, we are not, I mean, when you travel out there and you meet your colleagues in research and academia, they still see Ghana there and they ask you, how did we get here? Because everybody was looking up to Ghana. So the goodwill is still there. It is up to us to make sure that we make use of that goodwill and not to go back like the pig. Whenever we are cleaned, we go back and dirty house.
But there's this question about never again. I mean, I get some people and they are worried about the current state of the economy. Do you think that we have learned our lessons and we won't get into this space again?
I don't think we will not. I'm not a prophet of doom, but if I look at what's happened in 2000, 2001, 2002, HIPIC, and we're able to stabilize the economy, and then all of a sudden we're able to move up there, growth was high, stability, everything, and within a twinkle of an eye, we've gone down there. I sometimes think that if we don't take care, we forget so soon that we were there and we're able to get out. So even when we get out, are we going to learn our lessons? Well, if we are able to minimize the politics aspect of the management of our economy, I think we should be able to go far. But if we continue to use politics in everything that we do. For instance, if we are going to carry out projects based on political expediency, but not economic viability, then I'm sorry, we may have to find ourselves there even when we are able to get out of it.
Revenue, are we going to get it right this time around, or are you still skeptical as an economist?
Well, I think we will continue to battle with revenue, but I have to ask myself, what kind of revenue are we talking about? Since our O-level and A-level days in the the 80s and 90s, we've been talking about expanding the tax net, and we've been expanding it, and we have not stopped expand, but we are not getting what we want. It means there's something that we are not doing right. Let me tell you, when you talk about 13% tax to GDP, 13%, I ask myself, what goes into 13%? There are so many payments that the public, citizens, you and I are making, but government is looking at the tax, the VAT, the corporate tax, the income tax, and so on. Almost all agencies in government are becoming authority. And when they become authority, they are supposed to impose some fees or charges on the industry that they regulate. And those charges and fees come to them, and they have to manage it. So, for instance, if you take the tourism industry, I have realized, and I have been told, and I've also looked at it and spoken to industry players, there are as many as 13 different taxes, levies, charges, and what have you. EPA is there, Tourism Authority is there, Standard Authority is there, VAT is there, the local authority, and all of them. And all these monies are taken from the players. But it doesn't go to a pot where government will be able to manage and say that this is the revenue coming from here. So government will just look at what comes to the consolidated fund and say that our tax continue to be 13. So when government raises the tax again, the same people who are paying as many as 13, can they pay the 14? Can they pay the 15? And the moment we have so many taxes, people begin to avoid. That is why almost all the time we are talking about expanding the tax net, introducing new taxes. We still don't get the revenue that we want. You go to the port. Now I'm told the port is empty. Because if the taxes are so much, people will not bring the goods anyway. And that is the elasticity that George, if I bring my car and then the tax is 100 cedis, and I think it is too high, and 3 people are supposed to bring the car, and then 2 people say the tax is too high, so 100 cedis I cannot pay. So the only person who will bring the car will give 100 cedis to the government, isn't it? Now, if you reduce it to 50 cedis, and you are able to get the 2 people to join the 3rd person, you are going to get 150. That is the elasticity then that government should look at. The total tax revenue will be the unit tax times the quantity that you can get. But always we are looking at the unit tax, but not looking at the quantity. So eventually we will increase the tax, but we will not get the revenue that we want.
Do you think that these recent tax measures will fail to bring in the required revenue?
I don't think so. I don't think so. We have a new excise tax, we have this, we have that. If people are paying as many as 13 different charges, fees, taxes, then you bring a new one, people will avoid it. What measures have we taken to minimize or plug all the leakages that we have in the system? Have we been able to do all those things? I am happy that the exemption bill has now been passed, now it's exemption tax. How are we going to implement it to ensure that if I bring something, I will not go to Minister of Finance and say, exempt me from this, and I will not pay tax. If we are able to implement some of these things and minimize the leakage, we may realize that the taxes that will come will be quite sufficient.
Some are saying that there will be a pickup in, is it tax avoidance? It's not legal. The people will be avoiding some of these taxes because they will get more tax consultants to avoid some of these taxes, and we're not going to get the revenue tag. And that has serious implications for the recovery of the economy.
And the literature gives you the Laffer curve.
Yeah.
The Laffer curve. The moment you introduce so many taxes and so on, it will get to a point where you have so many taxes, but then your revenue will come down. And that, if you don't take it, that is where we will come to. And
are we getting there? Looking at the way things are going, because
let's face it, we all said it when we introduced the e-levy, that we have to tread cautiously. And we didn't. And we only came back to say, okay, now we brought it to 1%. If we had started with, let's say, 0.5%, perhaps we would have gotten quite substantial, it would have been a flop. So sometimes I think government should listen. Government should make sure that policies are based on sound data, science, and research.
But they know
but
this.
not based.
Some will say
It's not
that
based
they
on
know this.
Well, I mean,
With all the research, policy tax unit, advisory unit, they have this data at their fingertips.
well, I wouldn't want to say that, but what I'm trying to say is that, I mean, those who do research, our universities and so on, will be able to get you some of these rigorous research for you to know that if you don't take care and introduce so many taxes, and you have said that people will avoid it, if they will not evade the tax, they will rather avoid it, and government will not get what it wants. So I think government should come to terms and see that where did we go wrong? What can we do? Can we consolidate all these taxes, levies, and so on to make sure that we have what we want and be able to manage, or we can allow so many authorities to do what they want, and then government will not be able to capture how much they are getting, and therefore when you go to the same people to add more taxes, then you have problem. Can government do that? Government need to look at the tax system, the charges, the levies, and so on, and see the burden that people are actually carrying in the tax.
City stability. I mean, some will say that even the dollar struggles sometimes. Well, how can we get around the challenge of, we've seen the city within the 12 range for a while. And I once spoke to a businessman, he said that, George, I don't even mind if today one city is even 30. $1 is to 30 Ghana cedis. As long as it is stable, even for the next 6 months or 7 months. The volatility and all how do we get around that challenge? Look at what happened in October last year.
I think where we are stuck. What do I mean by we are stuck? Now, we are not getting any inflows. As it were, we were dependent on the Euro bonds to be able to get something as syndicated loan.
Artificial stability.
Yes, and some of these things were coming in. Now, we are not there. What has helped is that now we have suspended payment of our external debts, amortization and interest. That has helped to some extent. Now, we are not getting much from our export proceeds, as we want. So, the stability is because of where we are. I have said this, and maybe I may have to repeat. Within this range, whilst we think when IMF comes in and then things also begin to work well, but there's something that I think the central bank may have to look at. Maybe it's subject to debate, but we can look at it. I don't understand why, as a Ghanaian, if I'm not traveling, I can go to the Forex Bureau and say I need dollars. What am I using the dollar for?
Because people are pricing in dollars locally.
No, but that is illegal. You cannot price your commodities in dollars. So why do we have to do that? So for me, I think if the central bank, if Bank of Ghana law and regulation can be reviewed and say that Forex bureaus are supposed to mop up foreign currency. For the central bank, they are supposed to mop up for the banks, but not to sell. It means that if I come from outside and I need cedis, I can walk to Forex Bureau, give them my foreign currency and get the cedis, but not to get dollar and give my cedis. When you do that, it means that if I am traveling, and it happens in many other countries, and my colleagues at Central Bank, they travel more than I do, they know. And I will give you Finland as one of the countries. If you enter Finland, you cannot buy any good or service with any currency like dollar or so on, or even Germany. I was in Germany and I wanted to buy something and I didn't have enough euros and I thought I could use my dollar. I went there and said, we can't go and change it to euro before you can use it. Because the rules are there. So nobody would then go and buy dollar and so on. So you use the local currency and when you are leaving, you get to the airport, you get your boarding pass, the last point, then the Forex Bureau there, you can change and get a dollar. And if we are able to insist on this, why will we need the dollar in Ghana? Why do I have to buy dollar as a store of value?
Because some will say your city is not stable.
Exactly. But the point is that if your city is not stable, what is not making it stable? Because people are able to buy. Can we have a way to ensure that you cannot just go to the bank and say, I am buying dollars? If you have dollar there, you have to bring dollar before you can.
Prof, as you try and wrap up in a minute again, debt ceiling, is this something that we should be doing to try and check the debt? So I think that these are debt levels. It's crazy. In a minute, as we try to round up.
Well, debt exchange is trying to bring, but it's not sufficient.
Yeah.
What do I say?
Debt ceiling, where we should legislate on debt levels?
Well, I guess we can, but sometimes the executive is so powerful that even when you bring that ceiling, will they be able to comply with? And if the executive doesn't comply, is there anything that you can do? I think we need to look at that. I mean, in U.S., when there's that kind of ceiling, I mean, the president have to go and beg before. But I ask myself, in Ghana, can we comply with it if we bring it? I mean, we had fiscal council. Where is it?
It's not working.
We have been doing all these. So the point is that do we have to bring all these and
zero financing, good? Bank of Ghana, zero financing, budget?
Well, zero financing, good. But when you get into trouble like we found ourselves in 2022, and you insist on zero financing, the economy will collapse.
30 seconds, your final thought. 30 seconds, your final thought. Sure.
Well, I think as a country, I think we all have to bring our hands, but we all have to bring our shoulders on the wheel and be able to push. But the government, the one that is leading. And if government leads and tighten its belt, all of us, the followers, will also tighten our belt and will be able to get out of where we are.
The full Professor William Bate, congratulations again, one of the finest lecturers when it comes to economics at the University of Ghana, Legon. And I say congratulations again on your full award of professorship. One of the first indigenous to get this as well. It's been PM Express Business Edition. The debate will still go on in your homes and offices as to how can we better stabilize the situation in Ghana. The PM Express Business Edition. Have a great day.